30 days. That's all it takes if you're willing to do the work. Right now, you're emotionally fragile, and I'm not saying that to insult you. I'm saying it because it's true. Every criticism cuts deep. Every rejection stings. Every doubt from someone else becomes your doubt. But what if I told you that in the next 30 days, you could become someone completely different? Someone immune to manipulation. Someone who doesn't need anyone's permission to feel worthy. Someone whose emotional state doesn't depend on what other people think, say, or do. That person isn't a fantasy. That person is possible. And today, I'm giving you the exact blueprint to build them. This isn't motivation. This is architecture. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Emotional Vulnerability Trap. Listen. I'm going to say something that's going to make you uncomfortable, and that's exactly why I'm saying it. Your emotional fragility isn't a sign of sensitivity. It's not a sign that you care deeply. It's not a sign that you're human. Your emotional fragility is a sign that you've made a choice. Every single day, you've made a choice. And the choice is this: you've decided to give other people control over how you feel. That's not a weakness. That's not sensitivity. That's a choice. I know that's hard to hear. You probably grew up believing that being emotional, being vulnerable, and being open were strengths. Someone told you that. Maybe your parents. Maybe your therapist. Maybe a book you read. And they weren't entirely wrong. Emotional awareness is important. But here's what they didn't tell you. There's a massive difference between being emotionally aware and being emotionally controlled by other people. Right now, you're confused about the difference. So let me clarify it for you. Emotional awareness means you feel and understand your emotions. You notice when you're angry. You notice when you're scared. You notice when you're disappointed. That's good. That's healthy. But emotional fragility, the kind of fragility that breaks you, that's when you feel your emotions, and then you let other people decide what those emotions mean about you. You don't have an emotion problem. You have a permission problem. That's the key. Let me give you some examples because I know exactly what you're doing right now. I know exactly who you are. There's an employee somewhere right now who can't sleep. It's 2 a.m. Why? Because their boss commented on their presentation today. Not a devastating comment. Not even a clearly negative comment. Just a comment. Interesting approach. That's it. 2 words. And this person, this competent, talented person, is lying in bed replaying that moment over and over. They're constructing narratives. Does she think I'm not smart? Does she think I'm not a fit for the team? Am I going to get fired? None of this is based on evidence. All of it is based on their boss's 2-word comment and their desperate need to know what it means. Why? Because they've given their boss permission to determine their emotional state. Or there's a parent. A good parent. A parent who loves their kid more than life itself. And their teenager rolls their eyes during dinner. Just rolls their eyes. And this parent, this person who's done everything right, suddenly feels like a failure. They feel like they've messed up their kid. They feel like they might not be cut out for this. Their entire sense of self-worth as a parent just collapsed because of a teenage eye roll. Why? Because they've given their teenager permission to determine their emotional state. Or someone is checking their phone. Checking it again. Checking it again. They texted someone they care about. Someone they're hoping will care about them back. And that person hasn't responded. So they check. 47 times. They check because each time they don't see a response, they spiral a little deeper into catastrophe. Maybe they don't like me. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe I'm not worth responding to. Why? Because they've permitted a person's non-response to determine their emotional state. Here's what I need you to understand. These aren't signs of depth. These aren't signs that you love deeply or care deeply. These are signs that you've outsourced your emotional thermostat to people who were never qualified to operate it in the first place. You've handed your temperature control to people who don't even know they have it. And then you blame them when the house is cold. That's not their fault. That's your choice. And I'm telling you this not to shame you. I'm telling you this because shame is useless, and I don't deal in useless emotions. I'm telling you this because you need to understand something critical. The emotional control other people have over you is not permanent. It's not fixed. It's not something you're born with. It's a choice you're making every single day, and you can stop making it. Every time you wait for someone's approval before you feel okay about yourself, that's a choice. Every time you interpret someone's silence as rejection, that's a choice. Every time you change who you are to make someone else comfortable, that's a choice. Every time you cry because someone criticized you and you decide that criticism means you're not good enough, that's a choice. You don't have an emotion problem. You have a permission problem. You're waiting for permission to feel secure, and I need to tell you something very clearly. No one's coming to give it to you. No one. Not your boss. Not your parents. Not your partner. Not your friends. Not the person you're waiting to text you back. No one is coming. And that's actually the best news you could possibly hear. Because the moment you stop waiting for permission, the moment you realize that your emotional state is something only you control, everything changes. You stop being fragile. You stop being reactive. You stop being at the mercy of other people's moods, comments, and silences. Your emotional state becomes the only real estate you own. And right now, you're renting it to people who don't pay. Think about that. You're giving away the most valuable thing you have, how you feel, who you are, your sense of security, and you're not even getting paid for it. You're just doing it because you think you have to. You think that's what emotional openness means. You think that's what it means to be a good person, a caring person, a sensitive person. It's not. Emotional strength isn't about not feeling things. It's about feeling things and then deciding what they mean, rather than letting other people decide for you. It's about experiencing disappointment and not letting disappointment turn into self-rejection. It's about hearing criticism and extracting the useful information while discarding the poison. That's not coldness. That's discipline. Here's what will happen if you keep making the same choice. Suppose you keep renting out your emotional real estate. You're going to get more fragile. Not less. More. Because every time you give someone else power over how you feel, you're training yourself to be dependent. You're training yourself to believe that your emotional security comes from outside of you. And outside sources are unreliable. They're inconsistent. They're often cruel without meaning to be. So you'll keep searching. Keep seeking. Keep waiting for the right person, the right comment, the right validation to finally make you feel okay. And it never will. Because validation from outside can never create security inside. But there's another path. And that path starts with a decision. A choice. The choice to take back your emotional thermostat. The choice to stop permitting other people to determine how you feel. That decision is what the next 30 days are about. You're not going to become less sensitive. You're going to become selective about who has access to your sensitivity. You're not going to stop caring. You're going to stop over-caring about what people who don't matter think. You're not going to become cold. You're going to become strong. Your emotional state is the only real estate you own. Stop renting it to people who don't pay. Remember that. Write it down. Say it out loud. Because you're going to need to hear it again and again for it to sink in. And once it does, once you truly understand that you have a choice, everything shifts. You've now recognized the trap. You've seen how you've been caught. Now it's time to understand something deeper. You don't have an emotion problem. You have a control problem. And control isn't about managing other people. Control is about managing yourself. That's what we're going to talk about next. Chapter 2, The Illusion of Control. You're exhausted. And you don't even know why. You wake up tired. You go through your day tired. You go to bed tired. And you wake up tired again. You think it's because you're not getting enough sleep. You think it's because you're stressed. You think it's because life is just hard and demanding, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's a lie you've been telling yourself. The real reason you're exhausted is that you're trying to control things you have absolutely no power over. And that constant, desperate effort to manage the unmanageable, that's what's killing you. Here's the truth. You cannot control what happens to you. You cannot control what other people think. You cannot control what other people say. You cannot control what other people do. You cannot control how others interpret your words, actions, or intentions. You cannot control the economy. You cannot control whether someone likes you. You cannot control whether someone leaves you. You cannot control rejection. You cannot control disappointment. You cannot control any of it. And the moment you accept that, truly accept it, not just intellectually understand it, the moment you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, you become unbreakable. But right now, you're not accepting it. Right now, you're doing the opposite. You're spending 90% of your emotional energy trying to control things that were never yours to control in the first place. Let me show you what this looks like. You're at work. You have a meeting coming up. You need to present an idea. So what do? You don't just prepare the idea. You prepare for every possible reaction. You rehearse it in the shower. You rehearse it in your car. You rehearse it the night before. You're not just thinking about what you're going to say. You're thinking about how they'll receive it. You're predicting their reactions. You're planning your responses to their objections. You're constructing entire conversations in your head that may never happen. Why? Because you're trying to control their reaction. You're trying to guarantee that they'll like your idea, understand your idea, think you're smart and competent and capable. But here's the thing, you have zero control over whether they like your idea. None. Zero. You can present it perfectly. You can explain it brilliantly. You can anticipate every objection. And they still might not like it. They might think it's stupid. They might think you're stupid. They might be having a bad day and take it out on your idea. They might already have decided before you spoke that they're not going to like anything you say. That's not your problem to solve. That's not your problem to control. But you're trying. You're losing sleep over it. You're anxious about it. You're reconstructing conversations in your head to try to guarantee a specific outcome. And you're exhausted because you're trying to do something that's literally impossible. Here's another example. You text someone you care about, and they don't text back. Not right away. Maybe not for hours. And you spiral. You check your phone. You reread what you sent. You try to figure out what you said wrong. You wonder if you've offended them. You wonder if they're mad at you. You wonder if this is the beginning of the end. You construct an entire narrative about why they haven't responded. And the whole time, you're trying to control their response. You're trying to make them text you back through sheer force of anxiety. You're trying to predict and prevent their rejection by rejecting yourself first. You're trying to control something that has nothing to do with you. Maybe they're busy. Maybe their phone died. Maybe they didn't see it. Maybe they're thinking about how to respond. Maybe they're in a meeting. Maybe they forgot. None of these things has anything to do with how much they care about you. And none of them are in your control. But you don't believe that. You believe that if you worry enough, if you catastrophize enough, if you think about it enough, you can somehow control the outcome. You can somehow make them care about you. You can somehow prevent them from leaving. You can't. And here's the insidious part. This illusion of control is so powerful that it actually prevents you from taking action on the things you can control. You're so focused on managing their perception of you that you're not focused on actually building yourself. You're so focused on predicting rejection that you're not focused on creating value. You're so focused on preventing abandonment that you're not focused on becoming the kind of person who doesn't need to be abandoned because they're genuinely indispensable. That's the trap. That's the illusion. You believe that if you just think about it enough, If you just worry about it enough, if you just try hard enough to read their mind and predict their behavior, you can control the outcome. But you can't. And all that mental energy? It's wasted. It's stolen from the things you actually can control. Let me tell you what you actually control. You control your response. That's it. That's the list. You control whether you prepare for the presentation or whether you wing it. You control whether you show up on time or you're late. You control whether you're professional or unprofessional. You control whether you listen or whether you're too busy thinking about how they're judging you. You control whether you ask clarifying questions or make assumptions. You control whether you're open to feedback or whether you defend yourself. You don't control whether they like your idea, but you control the quality of the idea. You don't control whether they respond to your text, but you control whether you send it with integrity or seek validation. You don't control whether they stay, but you control whether you become someone worth staying for. Here's the key. The moment you stop trying to control what other people think and do is the moment you have energy to actually control what matters. Your effort, your consistency, your growth, your character, your values, your actions. An emotionally unbreakable person doesn't waste energy trying to manage other people's perceptions. They waste zero energy on that. Instead, they focus all their energy on one thing: becoming the kind of person who doesn't need other people's perception to feel okay. They show up. They do the work. They're consistent. They're honest. They don't over-explain. They don't over-apologize. They don't perform. And then, importantly, they let the results speak for themselves. You're not failing because you're not controlling enough. You're breaking because you're trying to control the wrong things. Stop managing their perceptions. Start managing your response. That's not just a nice-sounding phrase. That's the shift that's going to change everything. When you stop trying to control what other people think and start focusing on what you do, you become dangerous. Not dangerous in an aggressive way. Dangerous because you're no longer predictable. You're no longer manipulable. You're no longer dependent on external validation. You're a force. You're a person with agency. And here's what happens then. People actually respect you more. Not less. More. Because respect isn't generated by people-pleasing. It's generated by integrity. And integrity means doing the right thing even when nobody's watching, and nobody will ever know. It means following through on your commitments even when it's hard. It means being consistent even when it would be easier to be inconsistent. You can't control whether people respect you, but you can control whether you're respectable. You mastered the trap. You saw how you've been trying to control the uncontrollable and exhausting yourself in the process. Now it's time to understand what you've actually been seeking through all that control. It's time to talk about the addiction that's driving all of this desperation. Because underneath every attempt to control other people's perceptions is a deeper hunger. Chapter 3: The Validation Addiction. I want you to imagine something for me. Imagine you have a bank account. Not a financial bank account. An emotional bank account. Every time someone compliments you, you make a deposit. Every like on social media counts as a deposit. Every person who approves of you, deposit. Every achievement that someone notices and celebrates, deposit. Every moment someone tells you you're doing great, deposit. And every time someone criticizes you, every time someone disapproves, every time you feel unseen or unnoticed or rejected, you make a withdrawal. Now here's the problem. You've structured your entire life around making sure this account never goes negative. You've become obsessed with deposits. You're constantly seeking them. You're constantly performing to generate them. You're constantly monitoring whether the balance is rising or falling. And when the balance drops, you panic. You spiral. You take desperate action to refill it. That's validation addiction. And it's destroying you. Let me be clear about something. Validation isn't bad. Getting recognized for your work isn't bad. Feeling appreciated isn't bad. Those things are normal and healthy. But addiction to validation is different. Addiction to validation means you've become dependent on external sources to feel okay about yourself. It means your sense of self-worth is tied to other people's opinions. It means you can't feel secure without someone telling you you're secure. And that's a problem. Because here's what happens. The more validation you seek, the more you need it. It's like any addiction. You get a hit. It feels good. The effect wears off. You need another hit. So you seek more. You work harder. You perform more. You show up more. You seek approval more aggressively. And each time you get validated, the high is shorter and less intense than the last time. You're on a treadmill. And the treadmill is speeding up. Let me show you what this looks like in real life. There's someone who posts on social media. They take a photo. They think about it. They worry about it. They post it. Then they check the likes. 1 like. They wait. 2 likes. They keep checking. 3 likes. They're refreshing the page. Maybe they delete it because it's not getting enough engagement. Maybe they repost it at a different time. Maybe they post a caption that's more attention-seeking because the photo alone isn't generating enough validation. And I'm not exaggerating. This is happening right now. Millions of people are doing this exact thing every single day. Seeking validation through social media. Checking likes. Monitoring comments. Adjusting their content based on what generates the most approval. Living for the dopamine hit of being seen and validated. But here's the thing. Does getting 500 likes make you a better person than getting 50 likes? Does it? Does it actually make your life better? Does it make you more secure? Does it make you more worthy? Of course not. But you're behaving as if it does. Or there's someone at work. They have an idea, but they don't trust themselves. So they pitch it to 7 different people before they actually implement it. They're seeking validation from 7 different sources before they'll believe in their own idea. And if one of those 7 people doesn't like it, their entire confidence collapses. Their idea is suddenly bad. They're suddenly not good enough. But the idea didn't change. What changed is your external reference point. And you're using that external reference point to determine your internal worth. Or there's someone in a relationship. And every day, they need reassurance. They need their partner to tell them they're loved. Not because they're insecure in the relationship, but they're insecure in themselves. They don't believe they're lovable, so they need constant external evidence. And their partner has to keep providing that evidence, or the anxious person spirals. They become demanding. They become needy. They become exhausting. Because they're trying to fill an internal hole with external validation. And here's the cruelest part, it never works. The hole never fills. The validation never lasts. Because the problem isn't that you're not getting enough approval. The problem is that you don't believe you deserve approval in the first place. Your worth isn't a vote. Stop counting the ballots. Let me say that again because it's critical. Your worth isn't a vote. It's not determined by how many people like you. It's not determined by how many people approve of you. It's not determined by how many compliments you receive, how many achievements you accomplish, or how many people show up for you. Your worth is inherent. It's simply there because you exist. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to prove it. You don't have to perform for it. It's just there. But you don't believe that. You believe your worth is something you have to generate through external validation. So you're constantly performing, constantly seeking, constantly hoping that one more compliment, one more achievement, one more person telling you you're great will finally make you feel okay. And it won't. Because the only validation that actually matters is the validation you give yourself. The only approval that actually sticks is the approval you decide you deserve. The only security that actually works is the security you build internally. Everything else is borrowed security. And borrowed security is fragile. It can be taken away at any moment. Someone can change their mind about you. Someone can decide they no longer approve. Someone can leave. And when they do, if your entire sense of self-worth is dependent on their validation, you collapse. Here's what I need you to understand. You're not seeking approval. You're seeking permission to exist. You're seeking evidence that you're okay. And you're trying to get that evidence from everyone around you instead of from yourself. You're trying to vote yourself into worthiness. But votes can be taken away. People change their minds. People's opinions are fickle and depend on their mood and circumstances, and on things that have nothing to do with you. So you have a choice. You can keep chasing external validation forever. You can keep playing the approval game. You can keep seeking permission from people who were never qualified to give it. You can keep checking the likes, the comments, and the compliments. You can keep reshaping yourself based on what generates the most approval. Or you can decide that you're done. You can decide that your opinion of yourself is the opinion that matters. You can decide that your approval counts. You can decide that you don't need to be voted into worthiness because you already are worthy. And from that place, from that internally grounded place, everything changes. When you're not seeking validation, people respect you more. When you're not performing, you're more authentic. When you're not desperate for approval, you actually get more approval. Because people are attracted to people who don't need them. Paradoxically, the more you need validation, the less you get it. And the less you need it, the more it comes. But here's the thing, you can't fake this. You can't pretend you don't care about validation while secretly obsessing over it. You actually have to stop caring. You actually have to build an internal reference point that's so strong that external validation becomes irrelevant. That's what the next part of this journey is about. You've recognized the addiction. You've seen how you've been performing for approval. Now it's time to understand something that most people never figure out. There's something even more painful than rejection. And until you're comfortable with that thing, you'll never be free. Chapter 4. The Silence That Breaks You. Close your eyes for a second. I want you to think about the worst feeling you've ever had. Not physical pain. Emotional pain. Was it being told no? Was it being rejected? Was it being criticized? Was it someone leaving you? Was it someone being angry at you? Or was it something else? Was it not knowing? Was it the silence after you sent a message and got no response? Was it the text that was left unread? Was it the email you sent that disappeared into the void? Was it the conversation that ended ambiguously, and you never knew where you stood? Was it the relationship that was complicated? I'm going to tell you something that most people never figure out. Rejection is not the worst thing. Criticism is not the worst thing. Even abandonment is not the worst thing. The worst thing is ambiguity. The worst thing is silence. The worst thing is not knowing. Your brain is wired to prefer bad news over no news. It's wired to prefer clarity, even devastating clarity. Why over uncertainty? Because uncertainty is a threat. Uncertainty is a danger. And your survival instinct responds to threat and danger by going into overdrive. So when someone doesn't respond, when someone leaves a message on read, when someone disappears, when someone says we need to talk and then doesn't talk, when a situation is left unresolved and unclear, your brain treats it as a survival emergency. And it starts creating stories. It starts filling the silence with catastrophic narratives. It starts assuming the worst because assuming the worst keeps you alert, keeps you prepared, keeps you alive. That's the evolutionary explanation. But here's what it actually means for your life. The silence is breaking you more than any actual bad news could. Think about the times you've suffered the most. Was it when someone told you directly that they didn't like you? Or was it when you weren't sure, and you spent weeks torturing yourself with possibilities? Was it when someone said the relationship was over? Or was it when they went silent, and you didn't know what was happening? The silence is worse. Always. The The silence is always worse. And here's the tragedy. The silence is meaningless. It's just quiet. But you're translating it. You're creating meaning in emptiness. You're writing stories about ambiguity. You're assuming rejection from the absence of information. Don't torture yourself with what you don't know. Get comfortable with not knowing. That's the key. Let me give you some real examples. An employee sends an email to their boss. It's a proposal. It's something they've worked on. And their boss doesn't respond. Doesn't respond for a day. Doesn't respond for 2 days. Doesn't respond for a week. And every hour that passes without a response, the employee's anxiety grows. They're creating narratives. The boss hates the idea. The boss thinks I'm incompetent. The boss is thinking about firing me. The boss is mad at me. And all of this is happening in the silence. None of it is based on actual information. It's all based on the absence of information. Or there's someone who's dating someone new. They text. No response for an hour. No response for 3 hours. And they start spiraling. They're not interested. They're losing interest. They're talking to someone else. They're going to ghost me. The silence becomes evidence of rejection. But it's not. It's just silence. The person might be at work. Might be in a meeting. Might have their phone in another room. Might be dead asleep. Or yeah, they might not be interested. But you don't know. And you're torturing yourself by assuming. Or there's a teenager who says something they think is funny to their friend. The friend doesn't laugh. Doesn't respond. Just silence. And the teenager spends the next 3 hours convinced that they've ruined the friendship. That the friend thinks they're weird. That they're going to be alone. All based on silence. All based on the absence of a response. Here's what I need you to understand. You cannot control silence. You cannot manage it. You cannot strategize your way out of it. You cannot think your way out of it. All you can do is accept it. And the moment you accept that you will never have complete information about how other people feel about you, the moment you accept that there will always be ambiguity, the moment you decide that not knowing is okay, you become free. Most of your suffering comes from the belief that you need certainty to feel safe. You need to know where you stand. You need to know how people feel about you. You need to know what will happen. You need to know if it's going to work out. You need to know if you're good enough. But certainty is a fantasy. You can never know these things. Other people don't even know how they feel about you half the time. They're just as confused and uncertain as you are. And you're suffering because you're trying to acquire information that doesn't exist. So you have a choice. You can keep trying to fill the silence with certainty. You can keep asking people to confirm that they still like you. You can keep seeking reassurance. You can keep fishing for validation. You can keep trying to force clarity from people who don't have clarity to give. Or you can get comfortable with not knowing. You don't torture yourself with what you don't know by accepting that there will always be things you don't know. You don't torture yourself by building an identity that doesn't depend on external confirmation. You don't torture yourself by deciding that you're okay even if nobody ever tells you you're okay. An emotionally unbreakable person doesn't need silence to be filled. They're fine with silence. They're fine with ambiguity. They're fine with not knowing how someone feels about them. Because their sense of self doesn't depend on that information, they'll keep showing up. They're going to keep being themselves. They're going to keep moving forward. And if someone wants to be part of that, great. Suppose they don't, great. Either way, they're not waiting for the silence to be broken to decide who they are. Silence isn't a message. It's just quiet. Stop translating it. Here's what happens when you truly internalize this. The anxious checking stops. The desperate seeking stops. The catastrophic storytelling stops. You send the text, or you don't. You wait for the response, or you don't. And you keep living your life either way. You're not frozen in the space between sending and receiving. You're not suspended in the silence. You're moving forward. And here's the beautiful part. When you stop being desperate for confirmation from the silence, when you stop seeking answers from the void, you actually become more attractive. You become more interesting. You become more powerful. Because you're not needy. You're not anxious. You're not desperate. You've survived the worst thing about uncertainty. And you decided it wasn't going to kill you. And once you know something isn't going to kill you, it loses its power over you. You've mastered the silence. You've learned that uncertainty is not an emergency. Now it's time to understand something that's been holding you back your whole life. It's time to talk about the way you've been trying to prove yourself. And why that strategy is failing you. Chapter 5. Stop proving and start trusting. I want you to think about the last time you really wanted someone to believe in you or respect you, or trust you. What did you do? I'm guessing you didn't just be yourself and let your actions speak. I'm guessing you did something else. I'm guessing you tried to prove yourself. Maybe you over-explained something. Maybe you listed your credentials. Maybe you apologized for something you didn't even do. Maybe you worked extra hard on something to show them you were capable. Maybe you shared your accomplishments preemptively so they'd understand your value before they could judge you. Maybe you jumped in front of a problem to show them you were competent and on top of things. In other words, you performed. You proved. You demonstrated. You tried to convince them through evidence. And here's the thing that nobody tells you. The moment you start trying to prove yourself is the exact moment people stop believing you. I'm serious about this. The moment someone senses that you're desperate to be believed, they lose trust. Not because anything about you changed, but because desperation signals insecurity. And insecurity signals that maybe there's something to be insecure about. You're not failing because you're not proving enough. You're failing because you're trying to prove too much. That's the key. Let me show you what I mean. There's a talented professional. Really talented. But they don't trust themselves. So every time they present their work, they don't just present it. They apologize for it first. This might not be exactly what you wanted, but here's what I came up with. They're preemptively diminishing their own work. They're already handing the other person permission to dismiss them. And guess what happens? The other person does dismiss them. Not because the work is bad, but because the presenter just told them it might not be good. The work didn't change, but the belief in the work changed. And that change came from the attempt to prove. Or there's someone trying to build a romantic connection. They go on a date. But they're not just being themselves. They're being a calculated version of themselves. They're sharing achievements to seem impressive. They're name-dropping to seem important. They're oversharing their positive qualities because they don't trust that those qualities will be obvious. They're performing because they're desperate to be liked. And the other person senses it immediately. Not consciously, maybe, but they sense it. And they feel repelled. Not attracted. Repelled. Because neediness isn't attractive. Desperation isn't attractive. Authenticity is attractive. Confidence is attractive. Ease is attractive. Or there's a parent who doesn't trust their parenting. So they explain their parenting decisions to strangers. To their kids' friends' parents. To random people at the grocery store. They're constantly defending their approach. They're constantly providing evidence that they're a good parent. They're constantly trying to convince everyone that they know what they're doing. And everyone can feel that they don't know what they're doing. Because if they knew, they wouldn't need to explain it. Here's the fundamental truth. Confidence doesn't prove itself. Confidence assumes it's already believed. Confidence doesn't need evidence. Confidence just shows up and lets reality speak for itself. Proving is the opposite of confidence. Proving says, I don't trust that you'll believe in me, so I'm going to give you evidence. But evidence can always be questioned. Evidence can always be deemed insufficient. Evidence can always be reinterpreted. You can never provide enough evidence to satisfy someone who doesn't want to believe you. So what's the alternative? The alternative is trust. Not to trust in other people. Trust in yourself. Trust that who you are is enough. Trust that your work speaks for itself. Trust that your character is evident in your actions. Trust that the right people will see your value without you having to advertise it. An emotionally unbreakable person doesn't prove themselves. They trust themselves. They assume they're already worthy, and they let reality demonstrate it. And here's the weird part, that actually works better. It's counterintuitive, but it works. Stop selling yourself. You're not a product. You're a person. That's the shift. Think about the most confident person you know. Do they spend their time trying to convince you of their value? Or do they just exist, and somehow their value is obvious? Do they apologize for their work before you even see it? Or do they present it matter-of-factly and trust that it will speak for itself? Do they over-explain and justify? Or do they simply do the thing and move on? The confident person isn't trying to prove anything. They're just being themselves and trusting that that's enough. Now let me tell you something counterintuitive. The confident person actually fails more than the proving person. They take more risks. They do things without overanalyzing whether they'll be accepted. They present ideas without first validating them. They show their work without apologizing. They speak their truth without hedging it. But because they're not attached to the outcome, not desperate to be believed, not seeking validation through acceptance when they fail, it doesn't devastate them. When someone rejects their work, they don't take it as evidence that they themselves are bad. They take it as evidence that the other person had different preferences. That's it. Nothing about their self-worth changes. So they can move forward. They can try again. They can take the next risk. They can put themselves out there again. And each time they do, they get stronger, more experienced, more skilled, more confident. The failed attempts are just data. They're not verdicts on their worth. But the person who's desperate to be believed is the one who fails when they do. It devastates them. Because they've tied their entire sense of self to whether the proving worked, they've tied their worth to whether people believed them. And when the belief doesn't come, they conclude that they themselves are not believable, that they themselves are not worthy. And so they pull back. They try harder. They prove more desperately. They become more intense. And that intensity repels people even more. It's a spiral. Here's what I want you to do. Identify one area of your life where you're constantly proving yourself. One area where you're seeking belief, approval, or validation through evidence. Maybe it's at work. Maybe it's in a relationship. Maybe it's with your family. Maybe it's on social media. And I want you to stop. I want you to stop proving. I want you to start trusting. Stop over-explaining. Stop apologizing preemptively. Stop listing your credentials. Stop performing your competence. Stop advertising your value. Just do the work. Show up. Be honest. Take the risk. And then let reality speak for itself. The first time you do this, you're going to feel terrified. You're going to feel like you need to prove yourself more because you're proving yourself less. You're going to feel like you're being irresponsible. You're going to want to explain, justify, and convince. Don't. Stay with the discomfort. Keep trusting. Because on the other side of that discomfort is freedom. Freedom from the exhausting job of convincing people. Freedom from the constant performance. Freedom from needing external validation to feel okay about yourself. The moment you stop trying to prove yourself is the moment people actually start believing you. Not because anything changed about you, but because you stopped radiating desperation. You started radiating trust in yourself. And trust is contagious. People believe in people who believe in themselves. You've shifted from proving to trusting. You've learned to assume you're already worthy. Now it's time to understand the second way you're giving away your power. It's time to talk about the yes that should have been no. It's time to talk about the price you're paying for being too nice. Chapter 6. The Cost of People-Pleasing. Let me ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. How many things are you doing right now that you don't actually want to do? Not things you have to do. Things you want to do. I mean things you're doing because you're afraid of what will happen if you don't. Things you're doing because you're uncomfortable saying no. Things you're doing because you're afraid of disappointing someone. Things you're doing because you need to be seen as a good, helpful, nice person. How many of those are you doing? Because I'm going to tell you something that's going to feel wrong when you hear it, but it's the most important thing you need to understand. People-pleasing isn't kindness. People-pleasing is manipulation. I know that sounds harsh. I know that sounds wrong. You've been taught your whole life that being nice, being helpful, and being accommodating are virtues. And they are. But there's a line. And the moment you cross that line from authentic generosity into people-pleasing, you're not being kind anymore. You're being manipulative. Here's why. People-pleasing is a strategy for controlling how others feel about you. It's a strategy to prevent rejection, conflict, and abandonment. You're not helping someone because it genuinely feels right to you. You're helping them because you're afraid of what will happen if you don't. You're not saying yes because you want to. You're saying yes because you can't tolerate the discomfort of saying no. That's manipulation. Not malicious manipulation, but manipulation nonetheless. You're using niceness as a tool to control the other person's perception of you and their behavior toward you. And here's what happens. It fails. Every single time, it fails. Let me show you what I mean. There's someone who can never say no. A friend asks for help moving on a Saturday. They have plans. They don't want to go. But they say yes. Because saying no feels wrong. Because they're afraid their friend will be mad or think they're a bad friend. So they go. They move boxes all day. They're resentful the entire time. They're not present. They're not happy to be there. They're there under duress, pretending to be happy. And guess what? The friend can feel it. The friend knows they didn't really want to help. The friend feels guilty. The friend feels like they're imposing. And the friendship actually becomes worse because of this yes that should have been a no. If they had just said, "I can't this weekend, but I can help you next weekend," the friend would have been fine. They would have found someone else or rescheduled. And the friendship would have remained healthy. But instead, the yes-sayer sacrificed their own time and peace, and ironically, damaged the relationship they were trying to protect. Or there's someone in a relationship. Their partner asks them to do something they're not comfortable with. And they say yes because they don't want to be difficult. Because they want to be seen as accommodating. Because they're afraid their partner will leave if they assert a boundary. So they do the thing. They're uncomfortable the whole time. They resent their partner. They feel violated. And they silently blame their partner for making them do something they didn't want to do. But the partner didn't make them do anything. They asked. And they said yes. And now they're building resentment in a relationship based on a lie, the lie that they actually wanted to do it. Or there's someone at work. Their boss asks them to take on extra projects. And they say yes. And yes. And yes. Because they want to be seen as a team player. Because they're afraid of being fired. Because they need to be perceived as hardworking and dedicated. So they take on more work than they can handle. They work nights and weekends. They burn out. And then they resent their boss for forcing them to work too much. But their boss didn't force them. Their boss asked. And they said yes. And now they're destroying themselves based on a fear that probably isn't even real. Here's the thing about people-pleasing. It always comes with a hidden bill. You say yes today, and you're collecting resentment. You're accommodating today, and you're building anger. You're being nice today, and you're storing it all up. And eventually, sometimes years later, it explodes. You blow up at someone. You have a breakdown. You suddenly become difficult, ungrateful, and selfish. And the other person is confused because you were so nice before. But you weren't nice. You were performing. You were manipulating. You were using niceness as a shield. And when the shield finally cracked, everything came out. Every time you say yes to someone else, you're saying no to yourself. That's the key. Let me say that again because it needs to sink in. Every time you say yes to someone else, you're saying no to yourself. Every time you accommodate someone, you're putting your own needs aside. Every time you prioritize someone else's comfort, you're deprioritizing your own. Every time you people please, you're teaching the other person that your needs don't matter. And you're teaching yourself the same thing. So you develop a pattern. You become known as the person who's always available. The person who never says no. The person who's always willing to help. And now people expect it. They take it for granted. They feel entitled to your time and your energy. And if you ever try to assert a boundary, they act betrayed. I thought you were different. I thought you cared about me. But you did care about them. You just finally started caring about yourself. And they're punishing you for it. An emotionally unbreakable person doesn't have this problem. Do you know why? Because they say no. They say it clearly. They say it without apologizing. They say it without over-explaining. They say it without guilt. And then they move on. No is a complete sentence. It doesn't need an apology. That's the framework. When someone asks them to do something they don't want to do, they don't spiral into anxiety. They don't construct elaborate justifications for why they can't. They don't apologize profusely. They don't over-explain. They just say, "That doesn't work for me," or "I can't do that," and then they continue with their day. And here's the wild part. People respect them more for it. Not less. More. Because a person who can say no has integrity. A person who honors their own needs can be trusted. A person who doesn't over-apologize or over-justify is confident in their position. But a person who always says yes? People take advantage of that person. Maybe not consciously. Maybe the people who ask aren't malicious. But they take advantage nonetheless. They keep asking because they know the answer will be yes. They keep pushing because they know the other person won't push back. So here's what I want you to understand. Your guilt about saying no is smaller than your regret about saying yes. That's a true statement. Think about it. Think about all the times you said yes and wished you hadn't. Think about all the times you accommodated and resented it. Think about all the times you people pleased and felt empty after. Compare that to the number of times you said no and felt bad about it. The times you said no and felt bad were temporary. The times you said yes and regretted it have stayed with you. They've built up inside you. They've created resentment and bitterness. They've eroded your sense of self. So if you have to choose between temporary guilt and long-term regret, choose the temporary guilt. Say no. Say it clearly. Say it without apologizing. And then keep moving. This doesn't make you selfish. This doesn't make you a bad person. This makes you someone with self-respect. This makes you someone with boundaries. This makes you someone who can be trusted because they're honest about what they can and can't do. And here's the beautiful part. Once you start saying no, you'll have more capacity to say yes to the things that actually matter. You'll have more energy. You'll have more presence. You'll be able to show up fully for the people and the things that genuinely deserve your time because you're not spreading yourself thin across 1,000 obligations that you never wanted in the first place. You've learned the cost of people-pleasing. You've learned that saying yes is not always the kind thing to do. You've learned that boundaries are actually an act of love. Now it's time to understand what happens when you stop trying to be liked and you start becoming someone you actually respect. It's time to talk about failure. And why failure is the most important feedback you'll ever get. Chapter 7. Rewriting Your Failure Story. You failed at something once. I don't know what it was, but it happened. Maybe it was a business that didn't work out. Maybe it was a relationship that ended. Maybe it was a test you didn't pass. Maybe it was a project that fell flat. Maybe it was a dream you had that didn't materialize. And when it happened, you didn't just experience the failure. You experienced the shame of the failure. And somewhere in that shame, you decided for yourself. You decided that the failure meant something about who you are. You didn't get the job, so you're not good enough. You got rejected, so you're unlovable. You made a mistake, so you're incompetent. You tried something, and it didn't work, so you're a failure. And that decision, linking a failure to your identity, that's what's been holding you back. That's what's been keeping you small. That's what's been making you emotionally fragile. Because you're not just afraid of failure now. You're afraid of the verdict that failure represents. You're afraid that if you fail, you'll be proven to be fundamentally flawed. And that fear is so big, so overwhelming, that you don't even try. You play small. You stay safe. You avoid anything that risks failure because failure would be evidence of your own unworthiness. This is the trap. And it's devastating. Here's what I need you to understand. A failure is not a verdict on you. A failure is a data point. It's information. It's feedback. It's an opportunity to learn what works and what doesn't. Nothing more. Nothing less. Let me show you the difference. There's an entrepreneur. They start a business. The business fails. They lose money. They waste time. It doesn't work out. Now they have two choices. They can say, "This means I'm not an entrepreneur. This means I'm not capable of building a business. This means I should give up." And they can let that one failure define their entire future. Or they can say, "This business model didn't work. The market wasn't ready. The timing was wrong. I didn't have enough capital. I didn't hire the right people." They can extract the lesson. They can keep the data. And they can try again. With new information. With a refined strategy. With experience. Which person do you think will eventually succeed? The first person will quit. The second person will iterate. The second person will fail multiple times and learn from each failure. And eventually, they'll build something that works. They'll have failed their way to success. Or there's a student. They get a bad grade on a test. They have two choices. They can say, "This proves I'm not smart. This proves I'm not capable of understanding this material. This proves I should give up." And they can let that one grade define their ability. Or they can say, "I didn't study the right way. I didn't understand the material. I need to approach this differently next time." And they can adjust their strategy. They can study differently. They can ask for help. They can try again. The first student will probably do poorly in the class. The second student will likely earn a good grade. The failure wasn't the problem. The interpretation of the failure was the problem. Here's the key. Failure is just education you didn't pay for. Collect it. That's the framework. An emotionally unbreakable person has a completely different relationship with failure than a fragile person. A fragile person sees failure and thinks, "What does this say about me?" An unbreakable person sees failure and thinks, "What does this teach me?" One is about identity. One is about information. One is about shame. One is about learning. Think about the most successful people you know. Do you know what they have in common? They've failed more than anyone else. They've experienced more rejection. They've had more things not work out. They've been told no enough times. And they kept going anyway. Why? Because they figured out the secret. Failure isn't the opposite of success. Failure is the path to success. You can't get to success without failure. Failure is the tuition you pay for expertise. But here's where most people get stuck. They experience a failure, feel shame, interpret it as evidence of their unworthiness, and then stop trying. They don't keep failing. They don't keep learning. They don't keep iterating. They just quit. And they spend the rest of their lives wondering what could have happened if they had just kept going. This is tragic. And it's completely unnecessary. Let me be very clear about something. Your fear of failure isn't a sign that you're careful, wise, or prudent. Your fear of failure is a sign that you've confused a data point with a verdict. You've confused an outcome with an identity. You've made it mean something about you that it doesn't actually mean. A business failing doesn't mean you're a failure. It means the business model didn't work in that market at that time. That's it. Nothing about your fundamental worth changed. Nothing about your capability changed. The external circumstances changed. The results changed. But you didn't change. You're still the same person. You're just more experienced now. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about something you failed at. Something where you got it wrong. Something where you tried and it didn't work. And I want you to rewrite the story. Instead of I failed, which means I'm a failure, rewrite it as I failed, which means I now have data about what doesn't work. Instead of I tried and it didn't work, so I'm incapable, rewrite it as I tried and it didn't work, which means I need a different approach. Instead of this rejection means I'm unlovable, rewrite it as this person wasn't compatible with me. That's information, not a verdict on my worth. Fail openly, fail fast, fail forward. That's the new story. An emotionally unbreakable person doesn't hide their failures. They talk about them. They share them. They make them public. Why? Because they know that failure is just part of the process. They don't need to protect themselves from failure because failure isn't a threat to them. It's just feedback. But a fragile person hides their failures. They're ashamed. They pretend everything's fine. They suffer in silence. And they never get the benefit of learning from their failures because they're too busy keeping them secret. Think about the difference. Think about a world where you could fail publicly, and it wouldn't destroy you. Think about a world where you could try something bold, and if it didn't work, you just say, okay, didn't work, let's try something else. Think about a world where failure was just data, not shame. Think about a world where you weren't afraid of your own growth because you weren't afraid of stumbling along the way. That world exists, and you can live in it. But it requires a fundamental shift in how you think about failure. It requires that you stop seeing failure as evidence of your unworthiness and start seeing it as evidence of your willingness to risk. It requires that you stop running from failure and start running toward it. It requires that you stop protecting yourself from the possibility of failure and start collecting failures like a scientist collects data. Because every failure you collect is one you won't have to experience again. Every mistake you make is a lesson you don't have to learn again. Every time you try something, and it doesn't work, you're building the neural pathways of resilience. You're building an iterative mindset. You're building the confidence that comes from knowing you've failed before and survived. You've rewritten your relationship with failure. You've learned that failure isn't about you, it's about information. You've learned that the only real failure is not trying. Now it's time to understand the structure that holds all of this together. It's time to talk about the boundaries that aren't walls. It's time to talk about the doors that keep you safe. Chapter 8. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. I want you to imagine something for me. You have a house. This house is your emotional territory. It's your space. It's where you live. And for most of your life, you've left the front door wide open. Anybody can come in. Anybody can take what they want. Anybody can make themselves at home. You have no boundaries. You have no entry requirements. You have no standards for who gets access to your space. And your house is chaos. It's full of people who don't respect it. It's full of people who take from you. It's full of people who make demands. It's full of people who criticize your decorating choices. It's full of people who bring their problems inside and leave them there. You're exhausted. You're drained. You're resentful. But you never close the door. You never tell anyone they can't come in. You never set a boundary. Now imagine something different. Imagine you put in a door. You put in a lock. You put in a peephole so you can see who's asking to be let in. And then you get to decide. You get to decide who comes in. You get to decide what behavior is acceptable once they're inside. You get to decide what happens if someone disrespects your space. That's a boundary. A boundary isn't a wall. A wall says, nobody gets in. Ever. A boundary is a door. A door says, you can get in. But only if you meet certain conditions. And if you violate those conditions, I will close the door. This is critical. This is the framework that changes everything. Most emotionally fragile people don't have boundaries. They have expectations. They expect people to read their minds. They expect people to automatically know what's acceptable and what's not. They expect that if they're nice, people will be nice back. They expect that if they're generous, people will be generous back. They expect that if they care about someone, that person will care about them back. And when those expectations aren't met, they collapse. They feel betrayed. They feel angry. They feel hurt. But the person they're angry at didn't violate a boundary because there was no boundary. The person just did what they wanted. And the fragile person's expectations weren't met. That's not the other person's fault. That's the fragile person's fault for having expectations instead of boundaries. Here's the difference. A boundary is specific. It's clear. It's communicated. It's actionable. A boundary says, here's what I will tolerate. Here's what I won't tolerate. If you cross this line, I will remove myself. That's specific. That's clear. That's communicated. And it's actionable because it involves you taking action, not the other person changing their behavior. This is key. A boundary isn't about controlling other people. A boundary is about controlling your own access points. You're not trying to make the other person behave differently. You're deciding what you will and won't accept. And if they cross that line, you're deciding that you're leaving. That's it. No anger. No punishment. No negotiation. Just a clear action. An emotionally unbreakable person doesn't have much drama in their life because they have clear boundaries. They don't allow disrespect. They don't allow manipulation. They don't allow people to waste their time. And because they have these clear standards, most people who would violate them self-select out. They know this person isn't going to tolerate their behavior, so they go find someone else who will. But a fragile person allows everything. They allow disrespect because they don't want to be seen as mean. They allow manipulation because they don't want to be seen as difficult. They allow time wasting because they don't want to seem rude. And so they attract people who are looking for exactly that kind of person. People who are looking for someone who won't push back. Someone who won't say no. Someone who will absorb all their dysfunction. And then the fragile person wonders why they're exhausted. Why are they drained? Why are they surrounded by draining people? It's not because they're cursed. It's because they have no boundaries. It's because they've made it clear, through their actions, that anything goes. And so anything does. Boundaries aren't selfish. They're supposed to be. That's the point. That's the entire point. Let me give you some real examples. There's someone who lets people vent to them constantly. Friends call them at all hours with their problems. Family members dump their emotional garbage on them. Co-workers use them as an unpaid therapist. And this person listens. They listen, and they listen, and they listen. Because they think that's what it means to be a good friend, a good family member, a good co-worker. And they're exhausted. They're so exhausted that they can barely function. They're carrying everyone else's emotional weight. But here's the thing, they never set a boundary. They never said, I'm happy to listen for 20 minutes, but then I need to go take care of my own stuff. They never said, I'm not available at midnight. They never said, I can listen to this, but I'm not going to keep hearing the same problem without you taking action. They just absorbed it. All of it. And they blame others for draining them. But the other people aren't draining them. They're just taking what's being offered. The fragile person is the one who's offering unlimited access to their emotional energy without any boundaries. Or there's someone in a family where relatives constantly criticize their life choices, how they parent, who they date, what job do they have, what they spend their money on. And this person is constantly defending themselves, constantly explaining, constantly trying to make the relatives understand why they're making the choices they're making. But they never set a boundary. They never said, "I'm not going to discuss my parenting choices with you. This is my life, and I'm making the best decisions I can." They never said, "If you criticize how I parent, I'm going to leave." They just listened to the criticism and suffered. But here's the thing. The relatives probably didn't realize they were crossing a line because the line was never drawn. The fragile person just kept accepting it, which signaled that it was acceptable. Or there's someone in a relationship. Their partner treats them poorly sometimes, speaks to them harshly, doesn't respect their time, takes them for granted. And this person stays. They stay because they love their partner. They stay because they hope their partner will change. They stay because they're afraid of being alone. They stay without a boundary. But they never said, "If you speak to me like that again, I'm leaving." They never said, "I need to be treated with respect, or this relationship is over." They just accepted it, which signals to the partner that it's acceptable, which doesn't motivate the partner to change at all. Here's what I need you to understand. Boundaries aren't about them. They're about you deciding you matter. That's the framework. A boundary doesn't exist to change someone else's behavior. A boundary exists to protect you. It exists to declare that your time matters. Your peace matters. Your dignity matters. Your emotional energy matters. And you're not going to sacrifice those things just because someone wants you to. An emotionally unbreakable person has clear boundaries because they've decided that their well-being is non-negotiable. They're not rude about it. They're not angry about it. They're just clear. And once people know the boundaries, most of them respect them. The ones who don't, the unbreakable person simply removes themselves from the relationship. That's it. They don't try to convince the other person that the boundary is valid. They don't argue about it. They don't negotiate. They just act. They leave. They protect their own peace. Here's what happens next. Other people actually respect them more. Why? Because they've shown they have standards. They've shown they won't accept disrespect. They've shown they have agency. And that's attractive. That's respectable. People with boundaries matter. So here's your work. Identify one boundary you need to set. One place in your life where you're currently accepting unacceptable behavior. One area where you've had expectations instead of boundaries. And this week, I want you to communicate that boundary clearly. Not angrily. Not defensively. Just clearly. This behavior isn't acceptable to me. If it happens again, I'm going to remove myself from this situation. And then follow through. That's the most important part. You have to follow through. Because if you don't follow through, your boundary is just noise. It's just empty words. It's not actually a boundary. It's a threat you're not willing to execute. But if you follow through, if you actually remove yourself when someone crosses the line, then people know you mean it. And they'll either respect the boundary or they'll leave. Either way, your life gets better because you're no longer tolerating disrespect. You've built the structure that holds you safe. You've set the boundaries that protect your peace. You've learned that boundaries aren't cruel, they're honest. Now it's time to understand what happens when you stop looking outside yourself for answers. It's time to talk about the internal compass that never lies. It's time to find your unshakable inner reference. Chapter 9. The Unshakable Inner Reference. Right now, your life is being run by a referendum. Every decision you make, you're putting it to a vote. You're looking around the room, literally or metaphorically, and asking everyone else if your decision is good. You're seeking approval before you commit. You're seeking validation before you act. You're seeking confirmation before you believe in yourself. And this referendum system is destroying you. Here's how it works. You have an idea. Before you act on it, you ask your friends what they think. You ask your family. You ask your coworkers. You ask strangers on the internet. You're collecting votes. And if the votes are positive, you feel confident. If the votes are negative, you feel doubt. If the votes are mixed, you feel paralyzed. Your entire emotional state is dependent on the outcome of this referendum. And because referendums are never unanimous, you're constantly in a state of conflict. Someone disagrees. Someone doubts you. Someone thinks your idea is bad. And suddenly your confidence collapses. But here's the thing, you never asked for a referendum in the first place. You never needed one. The only vote that actually matters is yours. An emotionally unbreakable person has shifted the needle almost entirely to internal. They have an unshakable sense of who they are, what they value, and what they're willing to do or not do. This doesn't mean they're arrogant. This doesn't mean they're closed to feedback. This doesn't mean they ignore what other people say. It means they don't confuse feedback with their fundamental worth. It means they don't confuse disagreement with wrongness. It means they trust their own judgment. This is called an internal reference point. And it's the most powerful thing you can develop. Let me explain the difference between an external reference point and an internal reference point. An external reference point means you're constantly looking outside yourself for evidence that you're okay. You're looking at other people's reactions. You're looking at social media likes. You're looking at job titles, salaries, and achievements that others can see. You're looking at whether people approve of you. You're looking at whether people like you. You're looking for external evidence that you're valuable, capable, worthy. And because external sources are unreliable and constantly changing, your sense of self is unstable. You're up one day when someone compliments you. You're down the next day when someone criticizes you. You're confident after a success. You're devastated after a failure. You're no stable foundation. You're shifting sand. But an internal reference point means you're looking inside yourself for evidence that you're okay. You're looking at whether you kept your promises to yourself. You're looking at whether you acted in accordance with your values. You're looking at whether you were honest, even when it would have been easier to be dishonest. You're looking at whether you showed up for the people you care about. You're looking at whether you did the work even when nobody was watching. And because internal sources are stable and under your control, your sense of self is solid. You can be criticized and still know you're valuable because you know what you did. You can fail and still know you're capable because you know the effort you put in. You can be disliked and still know you're worthy because you know your character. You're a rock. You're on stable ground. Here's the key. Your internal compass is the only direction that matters. That's the framework. Let me give you some real examples of what this looks like. There's a leader who makes an unpopular decision. The team disagrees. The team is vocal about their disagreement. Most leaders would second-guess themselves at this point. They'd wonder if they made the wrong call. They'd feel the pressure to change course. They'd run the decision back through the referendum. But this leader has an internal reference point. They've thought through the decision carefully. They've considered the options. They've decided based on their values and their strategy. So when the team disagrees, they hear the feedback. They consider it. But they don't let it destabilize them. They know why they made the decision. They're confident in the reasoning. So they explain it clearly, they listen to concerns, and they move forward. And you know what happens? Over time, usually the team comes around. Or at minimum, they respect the leader for having conviction. They respect leaders who trust their own judgment. They don't respect leaders who are blown around by every opinion. Or there's a creative person. They make something. They put it out into the world. And they get mixed feedback. Some people love it. Some people hate it. Some people are indifferent. Most people with an external reference point would look at this mixed feedback and feel confused. They try to make something that appeals to everyone. They dilute their vision. They'd water down their creativity. But this creative person has an internal reference point. They made something that they believe in. They made something that expresses their vision. So when they get feedback, they consider it. But they don't let it dictate their next move. They stay true to their vision. They make the work that matters to them. And you know what happens? Over time, they attract people who love their vision. They build a real audience. They build a real following. They don't try to appeal to everyone. They appeal to the people who get it. And that's worth infinitely more than broad appeal built on compromised values. Or someone is making a life decision. They want to leave their job. They want to start their own business. But everyone around them thinks it's a bad idea. Their parents think it's a bad idea. Their partner thinks it's a bad idea. Their friends think it's a bad idea. The referendum is voting no. An external reference person would listen to this referendum and give up. They'd stay in the job. They'd give up the dream. They'd live a life that's safe and approved but hollow. But an internal reference person has thought through the decision. They know why they want to leave. They know what they want to build. They've considered the risks. They've decided that the potential upside is worth the risk. So when the referendum votes no, they hear it. They consider it. But they don't let it determine their life. They leave. They take the risk. They built the thing. And you know what happens? Sometimes they fail. Sometimes the business doesn't work out. But at the very least, they know they tried. They know they were brave. They know they didn't let fear masquerade as wisdom. They know they lived according to their values, not according to the committee's fears. This is what internal reference means. It means trusting yourself more than you trust the referendum. It means believing in your own judgment more than in consensus. And here's the beautiful part. Once you develop an internal reference point, you actually become more credible to other people. You become more attractive. You become more influential. Why? Because people are drawn to people who believe in themselves. Those inspire people with conviction. People respect people who make decisions based on principle, not popularity. But right now, you're doing the opposite. You're running everything through a referendum. And you're wondering why you feel weak. You're wondering why you feel powerless. You're wondering why you feel like you don't know who you are. It's because you've outsourced your identity to a voting system. You're letting other people decide who you are. You're letting their opinions shape your beliefs about yourself. You're letting their approval determine your confidence. And this stops now. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to make a list. Write down your core values. What matters to you? What do you believe in? What would you stand for even if nobody else supported you? What do you want your life to look like? Who do you want to be? Don't write what you think you should value. Write what you actually value. And then I want you to start making decisions based on that list. Not based on what other people think. Not based on what's popular. Not based on what's safe. Based on your values. You're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to second-guess yourself. You're going to hear the voices of everyone who thinks you're making a mistake. And you're going to keep going anyway. Because every decision you make is based on your internal reference point instead of external approval. You're rewiring your brain. You're building conviction. You're building an internal foundation that cannot be shaken. You're becoming unbreakable. Your internal compass is the only direction that matters. Write it down. Believe it. Act on it. Because the moment you start living according to your own reference point instead of everyone else's opinion, everything shifts. You're no longer fragile. You're no longer dependent. You're no longer waiting for permission. You're just living. You're just being yourself. And that's the most powerful thing you can possibly be. You've built your internal reference point. You've learned to trust yourself more than the referendum. You've learned that your own judgment is more valuable than external validation. Now it's time to bring everything together. It's time to understand what the next 30 days actually mean. It's time to turn all of this knowledge into architecture. It's time to build the new version of you. Chapter 10: The 30-Day Architecture. Let me be very clear about something from the start. This isn't a 30-day challenge. This isn't a 30-day motivation thing. This isn't something you do for a month and then go back to normal. This is a 30-day commitment to rebuilding who you are. This is a 30-day reconstruction project. And when you're done, you won't be the same person. You can't be. Because you're going to have to make decisions and take actions that fundamentally alter your identity. So let me tell you right now, it's going to be hard. You're not going to feel motivated every day. You're not going to wake up inspired. You're not going to want to do the work some days. In fact, most days you probably won't want to do it. Your brain will fight this. Your old patterns will fight this. Because change is uncomfortable, and your brain is wired to prefer comfort. But here's the thing, you're going to do it anyway. Because comfort is the enemy of growth. And you've decided that growth matters more than comfort. Every day you make a choice, comfort or growth. Choose growth. That's the framework. Now, let me give you the architecture. The specific structure of what these 30 days look like. Days 1 to 10, awareness building. The first 10 days are about noticing. This is the observation phase. You're not making massive changes yet. You're paying attention. You're building awareness. Every single day, I want you to notice 3 things. First, notice where you're seeking validation. Where are you performing? Where are you trying to prove yourself? Where are you seeking approval? Just notice it. Don't judge it. Don't try to change it yet. Just observe it. When do you check social media for likes? When do you over-explain something? When do you apologize for something you didn't do? When do you seek reassurance? When do you fish for compliments? Write it down. Build awareness. Second, notice where you're people-pleasing. Where are you saying yes when you want to say no? Where are you accommodating someone even though it costs you? Where are you managing someone else's emotions instead of your own? Where are you being nice when you should be being honest? Just notice it. Don't judge it. Just observe it. Build awareness. Third, notice where you're giving away your power. Where are you letting someone else's opinion determine how you feel? Where are you waiting for permission? Where are you seeking approval before you move forward? Where are you letting someone's silence or criticism or disapproval affect your entire emotional state? Just notice it. Build awareness. That's it for days 1 to 10. Just awareness. You're building a baseline. You're starting to see your own patterns clearly. Days 11 to 20, boundary setting and withdrawal. Now that you're aware of your patterns, it's time to start changing them. Days 11 to 20 are about establishing boundaries and removing yourself from the situations where you're losing your power. This is where it gets uncomfortable. You're going to start saying no. You're going to start setting boundaries. You're going to start removing yourself from emotionally draining situations. You're going to start doing things differently. Every single day, I want you to do 3 things. First, say one thing no to. One thing. Not everything. One thing. It can be small. I can't this weekend. I'm not comfortable with that. I'm going to pass on this opportunity. Just one clear, unapologetic no. No explanation. No apology. Just no. And then you move on. Second, take one action that scares you. One action that you would normally avoid because you're afraid of judgment or rejection or failure. You send the email you're nervous about. You share the idea that you're worried people will judge. You have the difficult conversation you've been avoiding. You do the thing. Just one. And you do it without seeking approval first. Third, practice your internal reference point. Make one decision based solely on your own judgment, not based on what anyone else thinks. You wear the thing you want to wear even though your family doesn't approve. You choose the career path that excites you even though your friends think it's risky. You say the thing you believe even though you know some people will disagree. You make one decision based on your values, not on external approval. Days 11 to 20 are about discomfort. You're going to feel it. But you're going to keep going anyway. Days 21 to 30, integration and reinforcement. Now you're at the final phase. You've built awareness. You've set boundaries. You've taken action. Now it's about integrating this new identity. It's about making sure the changes stick. It's about reinforcing the new version of you until it becomes automatic. Every single day, I want you to do 3 things. First, live from your new foundation. Don't just set boundaries on purpose. Live as a person who has boundaries. Don't just make decisions based on your values once. Make decisions based on your values consistently. Don't just take one brave action. Take brave actions as your new normal. You're not trying anymore. You're just being. You're just living as an emotionally unbreakable person. Second, collect failures as data. You're going to mess up. You're going to say something wrong. You're going to take a risk and it won't work out. And instead of collapsing, instead of questioning your worth, you're going to extract the lesson. You're going to treat it as data. You're going to keep moving. Third, reinforce your new identity daily. Every morning, before you do anything else, I want you to say something. Out loud. I am someone who trusts myself. I am someone who has boundaries. I am someone who doesn't need permission to be okay. I am someone who makes decisions based on my values, not external approval. I am emotionally unbreakable. Say it. Believe it. Live it. That's the architecture. Days 1 to 10 awareness. Days 11 to 20 action. Days 21 to 30 integration. And here's the thing that most people don't understand. On day 31, you're going to be a completely different person. Not because you're going to feel amazing. Not because everything's going to be perfect. Not because you're going to have it all figured out. But because you're going to have proven to yourself that you can change. You're going to have proven to yourself that you can take action even when you're scared. You're going to have proven to yourself that you can trust your own judgment. And that proof is everything. That proof is what makes you unbreakable. Because now you know you can do hard things. You know you can set boundaries. You know you can say no. You know you can take risks. You know you can fail and survive it. You know you can make decisions based on your values and survive the criticism. You know you can be yourself and not everyone will like you and you'll be okay. This knowledge changes everything. Because now you're not acting from fear. You're not acting from desperation. You're not acting from a need to be liked. You're acting from knowledge. You're acting from experience. You're acting from the proof that you're capable. And that makes you dangerous. Not dangerous in an aggressive way. Dangerous because you're no longer predictable. You're no longer manipulable. You're no longer dependent. You're powerful. So here's the final thing I need you to understand. 30 days of discipline creates a lifetime of freedom. That's not hyperbole. That's not motivation. That's fact. 30 days of saying no. 30 days of making decisions based on your values. 30 days of treating yourself like you matter. 30 days of building an internal reference point. 30 days of collecting data instead of shame. 30 days of this work and you won't need to do this work anymore. You'll just be unbreakable. You'll just be you. But here's the hard part. You have to actually do it. You have to actually commit. You have to actually take the action even when you don't feel like it. You have to actually show up for yourself even when nobody else is watching. You have to actually believe in yourself before you feel like it's true. That's the work. That's the real work. Not thinking. Not reading. Not understanding. Actually doing. So right now, today, I want you to make a decision. Not tomorrow. Not next Monday. Today. Right now. Are you going to do this? Are you going to commit to 30 days? Are you going to rebuild who you are? Are you going to become emotionally unbreakable? Because if you are, you need to write something down. Write down your commitment. I commit to 30 days of becoming emotionally unbreakable. Write it down. Sign it. Put a date on it. Make it real. And then tomorrow, you start with day 1. Awareness. You notice where you're seeking validation. You notice where you're people-pleasing. You notice where you're giving away your power. And you just observe. That's it. One day at a time. One choice at a time. And 30 days from now, you're going to be different. Not because you read this, but because you did this. Because you actually took action. Because you actually committed. The 30 days start now. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Now. Today. Right now. Are you ready? So here's what happens in the next 30 days if you actually do this work. You're going to feel uncomfortable. People are going to test your boundaries because you've trained them that your boundaries don't exist, and suddenly they do. Your anxiety might spike because you're no longer numbing it with people-pleasing and validation-seeking. You're going to fail. You're going to say the wrong thing. You're going to question whether you're doing it right. And every single time that happens, you're going to remember that discomfort isn't failure, it's building. You're rebuilding who you are. By day 30, you won't recognize the person you were. That person needed other people's permission to feel okay. That person was fragile. That person lived in a state of reaction, constantly managing how others perceived them. But the person you're becoming is different. They move through the world knowing exactly who they are and what they stand for. They can hear criticism without collapsing. They can experience rejection without questioning their worth. They can be alone without panic. And here's the most powerful part. That version of you makes other people feel safer too. Strength is magnetic. So the question isn't, can I do this? The question is, what am I waiting for? 30 days. One decision. Become unbreakable. Start today.